political environment in which the author wrote this text, we can have a general idea of what exactly were the issues that the author was trying to address. And this rigorous process allows us to give the author, even though the author is now dead, to say something to us. And if we do this, the text can also come alive as the author intended, and it can be renewing and transforming to us. But number three, we also need to take very seriously the situation of the reader, because the reader does not come to the text with a blank mind. The reader comes to the text having been influenced by different worldviews, coming from different experiences of life, from pain to joy, to fear, to anxiety. All these need to be taken seriously when we come to the text, because what actually determines how we must approach the text is also the experience of the reader in his or her situation as an individual or as a community. Last but not least, we need to consider the subject matter itself. Now, the biblical text is actually a text that represents different forms of relationships between human beings and human beings, but also human beings and God. And this subject matter of the relationship between human beings and God must thoroughly inform how we look at the text. Now, if we were going to look at, there are some tensions that I want to highlight before I give an example of how this could look like. There are dynamic relationships that are key in making such a reading experience transformative. One such relationship is the relationship between trust and criticality, or trust and suspicion. When we come to the text, if the text is going to become transformative when we read it, we must trust that it has something for me. If you don't trust it, you should not read it, because if you go to the text without any hope that this text is inspired by God to transform life, to go there will only be a waste of time. But this trust must not be naivety, because we know that the text is emerging from particular context. Therefore, we go there with critical openness. In other words, we go there with some level of suspicion. In other words, there's need for a balance between a hermeneutic of trust and a hermeneutic of suspicion. We are suspicious because it is written in a language of human beings. Therefore, it has some limitations to address some issues. So we need to go there with some level of criticality, yet with trust. Number two, we need to go there also realizing that when you go to the text, it has familiar elements. But this familiarity could be deceiving, because what may appear as familiar at face value could actually be strange if you start to look at in detail. So we need to go to the text with a familiar engagement, because there are familiar elements in the text, but allowing it to be strange when we look at the text with a close reading. Now, the third paradox that I think is important is that when you read the text, it may be affirming to who you are, what you are doing, but sometimes it can be completely opposing and challenging what you are and what you are doing. And if the text is going to be transformative, these tensions must be allowed. It must confirm and affirm who we are, but at the same time, it must challenge and call us to change. And if this is allowed, then the text can become transformative. Last but not least, the text must be able to address me as an individual, but also address us as a community. If the text cannot speak to me as an individual person, it will not enrich how I read it together in community. After all, the text is written to a community of faith, but this community of faith is made up of individuals. So the text must speak both to community as much as it must speak to individuals. The good thing is that when the text speaks to an individual, when the individual comes to community, they are authentic individuals coming to the community. And this community becomes an authentic community because it's a community that is made up of authentic readers who are addressed individually by this text. Now, the integrity of the text obviously comes from how we respect the literary aspects of the text, the right methods that we use to this text, and the word of the author obviously help us to enter into this text, and the readers bring their own world to this text, and the hermeneutical lens of the subject matter, normally our theological starting point, also enable us to enter into this text. Now, what I would have wanted to do is to look at one text as an example, how the text we were using today in our gender justice workshop. We just finished a contextual interpretation of the text of 1 Kings chapter 21, which you can see from the screen. Now, when you read this text, obviously we as readers here in Zimbabwe, we find it very relevant in our context, and that's why in the first place we chose it. But the reason why we chose this text first is because we wanted to say gender as an issue is a relational issue. So what we did is we took a text where we have three key characters: Naboth, a man who owns land; Ahab, the king of Israel; and his wife Jezebel. This is a very, very interesting text, because what we wanted to demonstrate is that when you look at this text, you are not only looking at the relationship between men and women, you are also looking at other relationships. For example, you are looking at the relationship between the ruler and his subjects. This is an ancient community where you have the king and those who are ruled. But you're also looking at other relationships. For example, the relationship of economics, of business. Because Ahab wakes up one morning and he looks at a piece of land and he wants to buy this land. So actually it's an innocent economic transactional relationship that Ahab initiates.